Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. So the Cybersecurity Playbook, Strategies for Resilience in Today's Threat Landscape. We're delighted to have you join us. This session is hosted by CommSec in partnership with Sophos and is designed specifically for IT and security leaders who are navigating an increasing complex threat landscape. So cyber attacks aren't going away. In fact, as organizations adopt AI and automation, the threat surface is expanding, and attackers are using the same technologies to move faster, exploit vulnerabilities, and test defenses at scale. And the latest State of Ransomware 2025 report from Sophos revealed that 32% of cyber incidents begin with exploited vulnerabilities, and 40% of those organizations lack the expertise to stop the attacks. So really challenging, and it's challenging most businesses on a day-to-day basis, regardless of size or sector. So that's why we've created this session, to help you build resilience, not just defense. And we'll explore how to prepare, detect, and respond effectively to these inevitable cyber threats. And how managed detection and response, or MDR as it's known, provides 24/7 coverage to help keep your organization safe. So today we have two great speakers joining us from Sophos. First of all, we've John Hope. Morning, John.
Morning, how are you doing?
Good, thanks, John. So John is the Senior Technology Evangelist with Sophos, who will share the latest insights from the ransomware report and discuss how the threat landscape continues to evolve. Our second speaker today is Bradley Collis. Good morning, Bradley.
Hey everyone. Morning.
Great to see you representing the Sophos brand today.
Always.
And we've already had a conversation about the Switch 2 in the background, which I'm really jealous of. So Bradley is the Global Solutions Engineer from the Sophos MDR team, who will walk us through practical strategies and demonstrate how MDR provides continuous protection in real time. And then we'll wrap up with a live Q&A. Please feel free to drop your questions into the chat box during the webinar. And let's get started. So hopefully you can all see my screen. And let me move on slides. So, second. There we go. So as I said, the agenda, just do a quick introduction. It won't take too long. And then we'll bring John in to speak about the ransomware report and the threat landscape. And then Bradley for strategies for success with MDR. We'll also talk to you about a threat assessment that Sophos and ourselves are offering, and then we'll do the Q&As. So just for people on the call who mightn't be too familiar with CommSec, who are we? Well, we're a specialist ICT security partner. That's all we do. We're established since 2013. We run our own 24/7 managed SOC, which is the engine room in the company. So we're Irish-based. We're based in Blanchardstown. And our standards include ISO 27001, Cyber Essentials, and we align our clients to NIST2 and DORA. And we've got clients all over the place now, not just in Ireland. And industries that we focus on are software, financial, logistics, fintech, public bodies, among others. Multinationals as well. And we offer end-to-end cybersecurity services via 4 pillars, and we're also proud members of Cyber Ireland. So the 4 pillars that we operate under are our managed SOC, which I spoke to you already. We offer services in there, including integrate the MDR into that pillar as well. We do security testing for our customers, so vulnerability scanning as a managed service under CheckScan Plus, and penetration testing as well is one of our main services. Professional services, so CISO as a service, data protection officer as a service, and we do gap assessments for Microsoft 365, for NIST2, for ISO, and a number of other frameworks. And our solutions that we offer, including Sophos, third-party vendor cybersecurity solutions. So we only deal with the best. So great to have Sophos on the call this morning. Some of our clients, recognize some of these names: the Irish Times, Primeline, Medical, and Setu, just to name a few, but plenty there. So we have lots of references in lots of different industries. So if you need to talk to us about that, please get in touch. just a quick slide on where are we with the cybersecurity regulations. So I was speaking to John and Bradley last week, and I just gave them an update, and we said, look, we better have a slide just to show what are the regulations that are out there at the minute. So probably the biggest one we spoke about was NIS 2. So a couple of weeks back, the government announced that they're going to transpose NIS 2 into law by the end of this year. So that's cybersecurity measures for critical sectors in Ireland and their supply chain, brings their supply chains into focus as well. So a lot of SMBs that deal with critical sector organizations, such as the HSE, for example, will have to adhere to these regulations. So it looks like it's going to be transposed by the end of the year, and then the suggestions are it's going to be March 2026, where there'll be a deadline for companies to comply. And the other big one at the moment is the Cyber Resilience Act, and that's for producers of digital products, whether it be software or hardware, that they bake in cybersecurity requirements into the actual design of the products as well. So it could be your smartwatch, could be an OT device on your manufacturing site, for example. And then the other ones that come up on a daily basis are DORA for finance. We spoke about NIS 2 already, and GDPR we're already familiar with. So that's really given us, strong cybersecurity, regulatory compliance frameworks for us to focus on. But we'll see now from speaking with John and Bradley that it's not all about compliance, it's about defense as well. So compliance is a good starting point, but building resilience and defense on top of that is really the goal. So I think we'll get going with our poll. Have a quick poll before we bring John in. So let me just tee this up. Got some polls ready to go. So just a quick poll here. Okay. So our first poll should pop up on your screen. How confident are you in your organization's ability to detect and respond to a cyber attack today? So the options are confident, somewhat confident, neutral, or not confident at all. So the answers are coming in. Good to see it. Nice. Second one, what are your biggest cybersecurity challenges right now? Is it managing alerts and incidents effectively, visibility of vulnerabilities and exposures, limited internal expertise or time, and increasing compliance and supply chain pressures? So that kind of really leads into your report, John. And our last poll, just around AI. Do you believe AI is making cyber threats easier or harder to manage? So obviously, it's a double-edged sword. We're using AI on both sides. So is it making it easier or harder to manage? And we publish those polls at the end of our webinar. Thanks for your participation in that. So John, I'll pass over to yourself if you want to share your screen.
Absolutely. Thank you very much indeed. Okay. Well, always great to start with a poll, actually, I must admit. It's one of the downsides of doing this sort of stuff over the net is not quite getting that interaction. So that's a nice touch there to get that little bit of feedback, and definitely give me some things to talk about. Before I do that, just very briefly, quick introduction to myself. My name's John Hope. I'm Senior Technology Evangelist at Sophos. I've been at Sophos since 2011, and I've enjoyed lots of different roles during my time here. But I spend most of my time now really hanging out with the cool kids in marketing and in our counter threat intelligence unit, because Both of them give me access to the statistics that I love, and some of which I'll be sharing with you during the course of this session, and also some really good anecdotes and insights as well from the operations that we conduct. So my role in this presentation really is to just give you a bit of a flavour of how the threat landscape looks, and it would be very easy for somebody who works at a cybersecurity vendor just to tell you that the world's a scary place, but given that you're on a security webinar, you probably knew that. So I'm actually going to give you something with a bit more intelligence behind it. Like I said, actually taking some stories and some research from our counter threat unit. So this is a division within Sophos that actively monitors and in some cases infiltrates cybercrime gangs, so we can better understand the tactics that they bring to bear, so that we can be better defended. And also, as has been mentioned at the start there by Dara, I'm also going to bring in some information from our State of Ransomware report. So if you're not familiar with this, then the QR code, which we should never scan QR codes, of course, but on this occasion, because it's on a Sophos slide, you can. That will take you through to the State of Ransomware report, which is now a staple within the Sophos calendar. It's something we do every year, now in its sixth iteration. And we employ a third-party company to contact as many as 5,000 IT managers, budget holders, decision makers, people very much like yourselves, really just to get a bit of a barometer about how the threat landscape looks and how they're experiencing the challenges of cybercrime. And that is what I will share with you to start with. So one of the first things that I'm always very keen to work out, because it has a practical outcome, is why do organizations fall victim to cybercrime? And as already mentioned in the preamble there, it is still the case that in 36% of incidents, what you're looking at is some kind of exploited vulnerability, which has been used by the cyber criminals to get into an organization. So what that actually means in practical terms is that some software has not been updated, something's not been patched, you're running some kind of legacy system. In some way, you've got a platform which is vulnerable so that the cyber criminals can get in, and that is the loophole that they use to penetrate defenses and then carry out their nefarious deeds. Now, on the face of it, you would say that that's a technology problem, but actually I would argue that that's the first of a number of technology but also people challenges. And what I mean by that is the fact that it's 2025 and most organizations know that they should be updating software, they know they should be patching, they know they should be doing all of those things. But the reality is that patching it's still challenging. There is sometimes a lack of technical expertise, but moreover, there's a distinct lack of time available. And patching is one of those things that we know we should be doing, but it always gets pushed down the priority order. Particularly when you look at all of the challenges around organizations and individuals' time, some of which we talked about during that poll there. Things like compliance takes priority. There are too many dashboards, too many alerts, and ultimately what happens is that patching gets forgotten about until it's too late and the cyber criminals have found a loop. But then below there, you've got a number of what are distinctly human-related problems. You have, for example, compromised credentials, which are sometimes usernames and passwords that are just weakened or compromised electronically, but it's usually that they've actually been harvested from the individual. Either they've been duped out of them through social engineering, or we've had some kind of hijack of a session that means that the cyber criminals can then use those credentials against an organization. And then you've got obviously phishing and malicious emails, both of which definitely distinctly require human interaction in order for the cyber criminals to get their success. And this is an area that we are seeing increasing, particularly increasing in sophistication, because as the cyber criminals realize that from a technology perspective, we are generally kind of getting better at protecting organizations, actually exploiting the weaknesses inside human beings and inherent with human beings is becoming a really popular attack vector. Unfortunately, as much as you can patch technology, you can't really patch humans. It'd be great if there was a USB socket and we could just download security data into all of our users, but that isn't the case. And the mechanisms that the cyber criminals use to socially engineer individuals are getting more and more sophisticated, particularly when you look at things like the use of AI to replicate brands, get over the fact that, let's face it, most of the cybercrime protagonists, that the English is not their first language. So using all of those things to create better crafted scams that people tend to fall for. And you'll see that kind of use of identity is definitely something which is increasing, and definitely is something which organizations should really pay more attention to. So looking at training users to make sure that identity isn't compromised and stolen, checking things like the dark web, which incidentally is a service that we offer, to make sure that those credentials are not out there and available for purchase on the dark web, again, which obviously can then be used against organizations. So really monitoring identity is, I would say, one of the first takeaways from this session. Another thing to consider is the organizational challenges. So moving away from tech, but actually looking at challenges from an organizational perspective. A couple of things I want to call out here. First of all, you'll notice if you add these numbers up, the astute amongst you'll realize very quickly it's much more than 100%. And that's because organizations typically cite multiple factors from an organizational perspective as to why they become victims of cybercrime. You've got protection challenges, which is either acquiring poor caliber solutions that don't do the job properly, or alternatively, actually having those solutions in place, but then not configuring them properly, which is surprisingly commonplace. So this is one of the reasons why we offer health checks to Sophos customers, to make sure that everything is set up properly and that the organizations are getting the best out of their products, or simply having situations where protection is absent, which also transcends into security gaps over on the right hand side. So this is either appetite for risk and accepting that we're not going to cover things, or oversight and not realizing that something is an attack vector. Things like Internet of Things and printers being really good examples of stuff that people don't consider to be a security threat until the cyber criminals find some way to use them. And then finally, I think this is a theme that we've heard multiple times already: resource challenges. So the lack of human expertise, either the actual expertise itself or the amount of time that's required to actually detect and stop these attacks and monitor the cybersecurity estate. Threat hunting, as we'll discover later on, is definitely around the clock exercise. The cyber criminals don't work typical office hours, so you need not just to have expertise, but also have expertise that you can bring to bear around the clock. So that gives you an insight into some of the organizational challenges. Next up, I just wanted to talk very briefly about what happens to the data if you do become the victim of a ransomware attack. And in the vast majority of cases, the cyber criminals are looking to encrypt data. So a ransomware attack is typically where the data itself is jumbled up in such a way that you have to pay the cyber criminals in order to get your data back. And obviously then you put your trust in the cyber criminals. In 50% of cases worldwide, the cyber criminals have been successful in encrypting data, which you'll notice is a statistic which has dropped quite dramatically. But before anybody starts popping champagne, even though it's a little early in the day, if you actually break those statistics down specifically to the UK and Ireland, what you find is that still 70% of attacks were seeing successful encryption of data. And you might be wondering why in 2025, given that ransomware is not something that is new, that we are still seeing a lot of successful attacks. And that is really down to a particular phenomenon known as remote ransomware. So I've not really got the time to go into it in too much detail during this session, but I would encourage you to go and have a look later on. Just Google remote ransomware. Other search engines are available, of course, but go and have a little look there and check out what remote ransomware is. It is a very commonly exploited attack vector, which almost all cybersecurity vendors have no protection against. So when you see those two things in parallel with each other, it is fairly obvious to see why encryption is still typically successfully completed by the cyber criminals. And finally, just on this slide, if you look at the light blue, this is an attack vector which we are watching with interest. This is where the cyber criminals will extort victims through other mechanisms. So not actually encrypting their data, but maybe stealing their data and then threatening to publicize it, which is an increasing form of an attack, and one which is very difficult to detect. So obviously, if you get an inability to access files, if you see ransom notes on your screen, then you kind of know you've got yourself a problem. But having your data stolen is often much more insidious and much more difficult to detect, and often attracts quite hefty regulatory fines as well. So lots of things to be thinking about from that attack vector as well. So next up along the list is, obviously, in most cases, if your data has been encrypted, what happens next? So there's a couple of worrying trends here that I just wanted to call out, and again, some practical tips for the audience. First of all is that you'll notice the light, sort of the turquoisey kind of color graph there, is the use of backups to restore data, and you'll see that that's taken a nosedive. And this is a very worrying trend, because organizations ought to know better and ought to be backing up their data. And in many cases, organizations are doing backups, but unfortunately, the cyber criminals know that you are less likely to pay the cyber criminals off and pay the ransom demands if you've got a decent backup. So what tends to happen is that the cyber criminals will target their backups very early in the attack phase to actually remove that recovery mechanism. And that's reflected in the stats here that show us that backups are less popular as a mechanism for recovery than they've ever been, mostly because the cyber criminals have tampered with them. Simultaneously, what we're also seeing is the cyber criminals getting a successful payout. So you'll see that percentage has gone up. Now, as a cybersecurity practitioner, it worries me that increasingly organizations are paying the ransom, because this presents us with a long-term problem. Essentially, if we continue to pay the cyber criminals off, we are essentially perpetuating the problem. We're encouraging more people into this industry, and I do use the term industry very deliberately. So we're kicking the can down the road from that perspective. I mean, it is also very poor from an ROI perspective, incidentally, as well. You still typically get about 50% of your data back by paying the cyber criminals off. So it's not a good strategy, and definitely something that we would suggest to avoid, not just because of the social and ethical arguments, but also just from a sheer practical perspective. It's not really the best way to recover your data. Now, what is the ultimate cost of ransomware? As you would expect, it is very significant. So what you see on the screen here is the approximate cost of an organization, considering things like the loss of business opportunity through downtime, the additional staff bills that you might have to pay, additional device costs, lost business opportunity, reputational damage, basically everything except regulatory fines, which are excluded from this set of statistics. And what this shows you is two things. One, if you're a bigger organization, eventually at some point the average cost to recover actually starts to plateau. Conversely, and I think more significantly, if you're a smaller organization, so in that 100 to 250 seat category, you are going to pay disproportionately more money as a result of a ransomware attack. So SMBs have this really unfortunate dichotomy of being organizations that typically don't have access to the best tools, the best resources, just because of budget constraints, but simultaneously get hit harder than any other organization by size in relative terms. So it's not great news for SMBs, and this also reflects an unfortunate truth that increasingly small businesses are becoming targets of cybercrime. Used to be that it was an enterprise only problem, but absolutely that's not the case anymore through really the industrialization of ransomware. Just one other thought on the stats before I move on to other topics. For the first time, we've actually started to look at the human impact of ransomware. I'm as guilty as everyone else. It is very easy to consider the financial costs, but there is a bigger cost in some respects, the repercussions on individuals. So a couple of things here to be thinking about. I'll let you digest the stats that are on the screen there, but I will talk about a few things. As you might expect, organizations experience individuals having more pressure, increasing workload. Interestingly, feelings of guilt, which is probably only sort of natural, really, because we all want to do a good job. And if an organization becomes a victim of ransomware, even if the IT managers and the security team, it's not their fault, they're still going to feel responsible. They're still going to carry that burden away with them, which can sometimes lead to absence through stress and mental health issues. IT is one of those sectors where we don't really talk about mental health that much, and I think that's very sad. Unfortunately, it is a sector where typically if you need to throw in the extra hours because something's not working, then you just kind of have to suck it up, and we don't talk about mental health in that context, and we probably should really reconsider that. And then finally, you'll notice down the bottom there, organizations replacing their leadership. So ransomware can have long-term implications, not just for the business, but also for individuals that might find themselves unexpectedly propelled onto the job market. So that gives you a bit of a state of how things are. Now, you might also be wondering, why is the situation so bad and who are behind the attacks? And this is the typical media presentation of what a cybercriminal looks like. They're usually portrayed as teenagers wearing hoodies, hanging out in mom and pop's basement. It's generally dimly lit, but I'm not really sure why. The reality probably actually looks a bit more like this. The reality is that Most cybercrime is delivered by one of a very small number of highly organized criminal gangs. So this is not just a random stock image. This is an area of Moscow known as Gorod-Stolos. It's kind of akin to Canary Wharf. So it's a very expensive piece of real estate, and we can point to at least two major ransomware gangs that through our research we know have headquarters here, or have in the past have headquarters here. So Ryuk started life here, that went on to become Conti, and we know about Conti because of the very public data breaches when they kind of disintegrated and fell apart. We also know of a ransomware gang who more recently has been arrested here, and yes, you did hear that right. It's very unusual for a ransomware gang to be taken down by the Russian authorities. But it wasn't actually anything to do with their cybercrime activities. So the cybercrime gang in question realized that they wanted to cash out from Bitcoin into fiat currency, and decided the best way to do that was to set up an import and export business out of the premises that you see on the screen here. And they use their Bitcoin to acquire various different bits of luxury Western goods and sell that for fiat currency. The Russian authorities shut them down very quickly because they failed to pay the appropriate import-export taxes on those particular transactions. So nothing to do with cybercrime, but everything to do with tax evasion. So there you go. You've got the same building, at least 10 years apart, still being used as a headquarters for the cybercrime gangs. And we know that this is really people's day jobs when we look at the initial attack vectors and map it. This is slightly adjusted for UK time, but what you see here is basically cyber criminals arriving at 9 o'clock in the morning, logging in, becoming more productive just towards lunchtime, taking a break for lunch, coming back energized at 1 o'clock, and which is really peak activity, and then ultimately going home at about 5 o'clock. So if there's any doubt left in your mind, then that hopefully should illustrate that this is literally people's day jobs. So we need to be thinking less teenager and more like a line manager, HR department, monthly target, monthly salary, basically everything that you find in a legitimate business, except obviously the way they're actually making their money. And you can see that illustrated through our name and shame graph, which shows you the cybercrime gangs. You'll see that even dating back to 2021, there are still a relatively small number of cybercrime gangs actually involved in this. So very big players, and a very interesting community where cybercrime talent is often exchanged, and there's actually a very real job market out there for being a cyber criminal. Now, you might be thinking, well, why is this important? And this leads me on to really introducing Bradley, because the game of cybercrime and protection has really changed because of the face of these gangs. They don't just have the huge financial resources, some of which you can see on the screen here, but they also have a massive quantity of human resources. So back in the old days, if you will, we would be looking at attacks that are really based around things like malicious files. But now when you're fighting attacks, you're much likely to be dealing with a human being at the opposite end of the line. And the vast majority of attacks, at least certainly the successful ones, actually involve a human operative, literally hands on keyboard attacking organizations. And this presents a massive problem because humans are still smarter than technology, and ultimately going out and buying any kind of protection and expecting it to protect you is actually unrealistic. Humans have the ability to adapt, problem solve, change tactics, all of which means they find it relatively easy to circumvent technology, particularly when you look at some of the techniques. I'm sure Bradley will expose some of these techniques in more detail, but things like supply chain attacks, we talked about multi-stage attacks, supply chain being a good example of that. Living off the land, so using legit IT tools against organizations, very difficult for technology to spot. Those stolen credentials we talked about, how on earth can you expect tech to tell the difference between legitimate use of logins versus those being used maliciously? That's not really a technology problem. And then exploiting weaknesses, so the weaknesses from a technology point of view around things like patching, but also the fact that organizations don't run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, for example, all very good weaknesses that cyber criminals can utilize. So we win by monitoring the underlying signs that an organization is about to become a victim. There are always warning signs. In as many as 83% of the cases that our team have investigated post-breach, there are signs that tell us an organisation is about to become a victim. We see crims logging in, we see them escalate privileges, we see them moving laterally around the estate, we see them exfiltrating data, and then eventually organisations typically find out when ransom demands start popping up on the screen. But there's this whole trail of breadcrumbs that goes in before that point. And if only we could disrupt the attack beforehand, we'd probably escape the worst of the attack. The problem is finding those signs is kind of inherently difficult. If you look around your own office right now, every laptop, every desktop, every switch, every firewall, every access point, every router, almost every piece of software, they're all generating logs. Now, somewhere in those logs, there might just be something that tells you you're about to become a victim, but it's pretty difficult to spot in all of that noise. And a lot of organizations have gone out there, they've bought tools like EDR, like XDR, but we already know that tech on its own isn't enough to solve the problems. And actually going out and buying more search tools and technology, it's not going to equip you to be a threat hunter, realistically. In the same way that if I go to the sports goods shop and I buy myself a set of boxing gloves, it's not going to make me a fighter. Having the tools is one thing. Actually having the ability to use those tools is something completely different. Our fundamental belief at Sophos is now really that cybersecurity has been challenging for a long time, but it's now become too difficult for most organizations to deal with effectively on their own. If you look at the headlines and you see major manufacturers like Jaguar Land Rover, you see airlines, banks, hotel groups, all sorts of different organizations all becoming victims. If they can't do cybersecurity properly with all the resources that they've got at their disposal, how could you expect the Acme Sprocket company with 5 employees to be able to do cybersecurity effectively? It's just unrealistic. We feel like the best cybersecurity outcomes really come from partnership. And that is going to hand me very nicely over to Bradley to take the stage now to really explain a bit more about the partnership opportunities that we offer and how Sophos can help you with the challenges of cybersecurity. So Brad, it's over to you.
Thank you very much for terrifying everyone, John. That's always useful. And John's right. Look, it's tough out there. It's tough as a cybersecurity practitioner. It's tough as an organization that is relying obviously on your own internal security teams to deal with these things. But really, it isn't. The end is not nigh. It's not all doom and gloom, and there's a lot that can be done with the tech you guys already have in place, with the partnerships you've got with CommSec and other obviously security providers that you may work with. And of course, ultimately with Sophos as well. So let's take a step back. Let's step right back from all the horrific stuff that John's just covered, and we'll have a look at what we can do and what you can do to actually utilize the point products that, as John mentioned, you've probably built up over a period of time to actually deliver something which is effectively going to control the security success and elevate that to a level where you don't just become a statistic in next year's State of Ransomware report. Brief introduction for me. I'm Bradley. I'm a solutions consultant at Sophos. I've been at Sophos for almost 12 years now. I spent a chunk of time as a subject matter expert for our endpoint solutions. And then the last sort of 5-6 years, I've been within our security enablement and pre-sales teams, working out how we can shape the solutions that Sophos provide. And obviously we provide via CommSec and our other partners to your organizations and the stuff that you guys need to do to make sure that you're secure at the end of the day. So again, just to throw a few more horrific stats at you guys, the average time for an attacker to access the network, build up to a point where they're going to do something, and then actually go and trigger that attack is about 7 days. So you've got generally a week, maybe less, to actually identify an attacker is in the network and do something about it. To make that even more difficult, the vast majority, so 88% of attacks, actually happen outside of standard business hours. So if you've got an IT security team, awesome, fantastic. A lot of organizations out there don't have the capabilities to do that. If they're not working weekends and evenings, you're going to miss the attack happening. And that's reiterated by that final stat there that almost 2/3 of customers that we spoke to and the people that we spoke to that were attacked out in the industry, they just felt they didn't have the people and all the skills within those teams to go and deal with it. That's why we provide MDR. That's why we've built out a managed service to utilize your Sophos tech, your third-party security tech, whatever security solutions you may have in place to take that stress away from you guys. So we've been doing this for 7 years, 8 years now, something like that. And we are probably the biggest MDR provider on the market. Globally, we've got over 35,000 customers. That's on top of the 600,000 Sophos customers we have globally. Those numbers are not just us boasting. Every single one of those customers feeds technology and threat research and threat intelligence back into the Sophos machine so that our Sophos research teams, our counter threat unit, and everyone behind the scenes that generates all the data for our solutions and our services can get the most recent threat intel. So you may be a 200 seat customer in Ireland, but you've got the same level of protection, the same level of threat intelligence as a 2 million seat customer in the north of America. We deliver the service globally, so we actually have a full follow the sun support team that actually deliver this from a security operations center perspective, and they are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, bank holidays, Christmas, every single day of the year, to investigate these things and actually daily stop several hundred attacks in their tracks. We do this using a mixture of technology. So, as John mentioned, definitely post-pandemic, people have found a lot of the time that they need to bring in new point products. Oh, we've got an email security issue. Bang, let's go and find out a best-in-class email vendor. Oh, we need a new firewall. Okay, let's go and find a firewall vendor. Not necessarily all of these vendors are coming, or all of these products are coming from the same vendor. It may be that, for example, you're a Sophos customer and you've built into the Sophos ecosystem. You've got Sophos firewall, Sophos endpoint, Sophos email, Sophos mobile. We know that's the minority of customers. We know the vast majority of customers have got a blended approach when it comes to security, blended vendors they're using. And to John's point, that generates a horrific amount of telemetry for you to then go and investigate, monitor, report against, threat hunt against. So for our MDR platform and the platform we've built to support all of this, we will take the technology that you have in place. Starting 1st of November, you can integrate anything that we support into Sophos at no additional cost. Meaning that if you have Proofpoint email, or you are a Microsoft house using E5, or you're using Google, you've got a Google Cloud setup where you're using Google Security Center, send all that data to us. We will take a look at it in combination with everything we're getting from your Sophos security solutions or any of these others. And we will try and correlate these with each other and understand the pattern of what's happening, understand if there's significant trends, significant storylines actually happening in there, to identify, have John's credentials been harvested from the dark web? Is someone trying to log into Azure at 3 a.m. using John's credentials, but with a stolen session token that expired 2 weeks ago? These things are going to get picked up by us. And yes, that is our technology that is getting us to that point, but these are always passed to an analyst. We always pass these over to a security expert to actually go and take action against these, to go and do further threat hunting, further investigation, and to deal with that hands-on keyboard attack by being a hands-on keyboard defender and taking actions against that. To John's point, and to really hammer that point home, this is how much data we see on a daily basis. Some of these numbers obviously completely pie in the sky. You'd never understand have a concept of what these means. But the most important thing is, look, out of all of the data we collect across all of our customers, 34 million of those pieces of telemetry are interesting to us. If we divide that by 35,000 or whatever, that's still several thousand detections per customer. Meaning that you, as a potential customer of Sophos MDR, that's the amount of data you have to trawl through on a daily basis to identify if you're at risk. We can do that for you. We can go through, we can do that investigation, we can look at the correlation, look at the storyline. If you're using Sophos endpoint, you'd have best-in-class endpoint protection, stopping remote ransomware, stopping attacks in their path, feeding that data through to MDR, so that we can actually step in and we can take, at the bottom of that diagram, direct remediative action to stop those attacks in their tracks. And that's a lot of data, that's a lot of stuff we're dealing with, and we deal with this incredibly quickly. On average, our response time from case creation through to us taking action is about 38 minutes. If we look at how we poll internal SOC teams at customers who have those in place, you're looking on average about 18 hours response time. So not only are we collecting that massive amount of data and taking action against it, we're doing it significantly quicker than if you were building your own in-house SOC. Meaning that 7-day dwell time that's potentially there, we're catching things in day one. We're catching things very early on in day one, and we're taking action so that you don't have to worry about, again, John's horrific graphs of how much data was encrypted or data stolen, or what your $1.8 million rebuild cost for an enterprise customer is. We're dealing with these things very early on in the threat lifecycle. If you think of the cyber kill chain, we're looking at initial access, lateral movement, persistence mechanisms, dealing with these things before they get really nasty, so that we can take discrete, easy remediation actions, and then you guys can step in and do the hardening with our guidance as well to make sure this never happens again. Big trend post-pandemic, obviously, is a lot of people have invested in platforms such as Microsoft. And we also know Microsoft have a significant array of different licensing models in place. A real challenge for organizations with Microsoft is that the vast majority of them aren't going to have Microsoft E5. You're not going to have E5 security in place. Across our customer base, the vast majority of our customers have business premium, maybe some E3, maybe some plan 2. If you don't have Microsoft E5, there's obviously a significant chunk of Microsoft's own protections and monitoring that is going to be missed out of that. We, as Sophos, will integrate with anything you have from Microsoft. If you have E5, awesome. We'll take all of that E5 data from Entra. We'll take the premium detections out of Entra, everything out of Defender for Cloud Apps, everything out of Defender for 365. Inversely, if you have Business Basic or Business Premium, we'll take that raw data out of Microsoft. We'll make our own opinion on that data. We can take data out of things like Business Basic and Business Premium, and then we can go and do business email compromise alerts against that. We can look for attacks logging in, again, expired session tokens, suspicious connection strings, all of these sorts of things that unless you have E5, Microsoft ain't going to do for you. So we know that people have invested significantly in Microsoft and in Google and these other cloud platforms because they've moved away from that traditional on-premise network. That makes your job an awful lot harder as a security administrator or a defender. Pass that over to us. It's all part of MDR. We can take that data, we can investigate it, we can monitor it. Again, we can take action, we can provide guidance. If needs be, we can take reactions directly in 365. We can interact with Entra, we can block user sign-ins, we can disconnect sessions. Inversely, if you're still using on-premise Active Directory, we can take these actions as well. So wherever you are in your security or technology journey, you can bring us into it. You can work with us, you can work with CommSec, and we can put these layers of security and protections in place so that, again, 3 a.m. on a Sunday, someone starts taking malicious actions in 365, we can be there to stop them, shut them out, bring you guys in to deliver that hardening as well. And to give you an idea, this is a real attack we saw in August. So this was an adversary in the middle attack. This was a detection within 365. There was no Sophos endpoint involved, no Defender endpoint, anything like that. We saw, using our own detection methodology, someone logged in to 365 using a suspicious user agent. Axios is a hacking or phishing toolkit used by attackers. We saw an attacker leveraging that toolkit to log into 365. Because we have that integration with Microsoft, automatically we logged a response action, we disabled that sign-in, we terminated the active sessions. If you look at the timing, that happened a minute after. So within a minute of an attack happening in 365, we jumped in, we terminated that, we contained that threat. Then the next day, when the attacker the user or the administrator came in, we spoke with them, we worked with them to reset that password and re-enable that user session. If that had been up to the internal administrator to identify that, they may have picked it up on the 14th of August at 6:48. Realistically, it would have probably been a few more days till they realised it had happened, and by that time, the attacker has already compromised further credentials, moved laterally into other estates, into cloud, and into other on-premise solutions. It's not just Microsoft. Anything on this list, any vendor you can see here, we can integrate with. And as I said, from the 1st of November, that's just included in the base cost of a service. So you can integrate with Sophos endpoint, Sophos email, Sophos mobile, Sophos firewall, Sophos NDR. But inversely, if you've got Fortinet firewalls, maybe you're a SentinelOne endpoint customer, maybe use Kaspersky, maybe use Panda, maybe use WebRoot, maybe you're using Entra or Duo, maybe you're using Mimecast for email or Proofpoint for email. All these things you still have to monitor and manage. And that is overwhelming, as John obviously displayed to us quite early on in his presentation. Send that to us. Look into MDR. There's various different levels of MDR that we can work with to shape around your requirements. Send that data to us. We'll investigate it for you. We'll respond where we can. We'll collaborate with you guys and with CommSec to deliver response if we need to. That's MDR. That is the playbook here for dealing with a threat from all of those different security things that you guys have in place in your environment. Alongside that, it's really important to actually ensure that the security you've got in place is sufficient and working towards you. We provide, as Sophos, and obviously partnering and enhancing and working with CommSec alongside the services they deliver, we can do a lot of work with you guys around actually making sure before an attack happens, are you prepared? So hopefully you guys have got an instant response plan, obviously with NIST2 and some of the other government mandated security models in place. It's really a requirement now for you guys to make sure that your security is proactively there. So we can work with you guys and with CommSec to scope at things such as instant response planning. We can do security assessments on Entra. We can look at your Active Directory and make sure that there's not security risks there. On top of all that, we can build out penetration testing and full red team exercises, again, working with CommSec, building upon what they're already providing to you guys, and filling in some of those additional niche security things that you may actually need to investigate and monitor as part of your network. So that could be anything from an internal or external penetration test. Again, something CommSec is probably providing for you guys already. But we can go through and do things like physical security testing. Maybe you have a secure site. You have a site where you do not want any unauthenticated access through actually coming in through the front door. We can work with you guys. We can scope these up. We've done physical penetration testing on Department of Defense in the US, Ministry of Defense in the UK. We can do that for anyone of any size and any organization. There's a whole suite of testing and readiness and tabletops and these sorts of things that we can deliver for you guys. If any of that thing is interesting, and you're probably already consulting on some of those things with CommSec, bring Dara and the guys into those conversations. They can work out obviously where CommSec can already fill that niche for you guys, and also where Sophos may be able to provide additional services around the edges to make sure that when the worst does happen, because it is very much a when, first of all, you've got MDR in place. You've got a really good security team behind you that can deal with these things as they come through. But you've actually tested your first line defense. You've actually tested your front line to make sure that attacks do not get into the network in the first place. Hopefully that's been helpful. I know Dara wanted to tee up some Q&A. I know we're pushing against time, but Dara, is there anything that's come from the floor that you wanted to raise for me or John?
Not as yet, Bradley, but we're tight on time anyway, so we'll definitely move on. But I do have a question myself. So obviously, a lot of organizations see the cloud as being safe by design. We know that's not the case. Is Cloud ID helping or harming our defenses and resilience?
Who wants to go first? Do you want to tip on that, John?
Well, I'll start. So the cloud is essentially an extension of your own internal IT. So if you look up things like the shared responsibility model, that really kind of explains where your cloud service provider's responsibilities start and finish, which is typically just the physical kit itself. So literally stopping people walking up to a server and touching them is about it. But as soon as you start installing operating systems and run software, then that's still your problem. So the cloud doesn't really inherently make you any more secure. And in some respects, it probably harms visibility because it's just another source of telemetry, because now you're looking at your server farm in the office and you're also thinking about the cloud. So you need to make sure you're bringing the telemetry in from those places as well into Bradley's team. So yeah, Bradley, have you got any thoughts on that? Anything to add?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head, as in the cloud platform, as in the provider that provides that cloud platform to you obviously has their security methodology in place to protect their investments. But realistically, when it comes down to what you're doing in cloud, it's purely up to you guys. So if, for example, an attacker does breach 365 through an insecure login where you haven't got MFA enabled, Microsoft ain't going to foot the bill for that, because at the end of the day, this is the solutions they've provided you are secure. But you need to make sure you're implementing the right level of security on top of that base secure platform to make sure that your data that resides in that cloud platform is secure. And that's really where it comes down to making sure you're monitoring who's touching data, what they're touching, what they're doing with it, and also proactively making sure that people can't get to that data in the first place, and making sure that you've got the right compliance rules in place, you've got the right conditional access rules in place, and you're reviewing who is actually hitting up against those rules, which may be indicative of a wider breach or more going on within that estate.
Great, thanks very much, guys. Just a couple of questions have come in there. Ian is looking for a copy of the slides, so I'll talk to you afterwards if we can get a PDF version or whatever's able to, we can share from that. I'll be in touch later on today, Ian, about that. Tracy, in the range, what is the cost of the product? So without going into exact figures, you know, what is the cost of MDR versus something like a managed SOC or putting in your own in-house team?
For an in-house team, I mean, the cost of actually deploying your own internal security team is let's say substantial. I mean, to deliver a 24/7 service, you're looking at needing 7 people, so split between management and shift work. The average costs, okay, maybe slightly, it's probably similar, akin between Dublin and London. But for example, a cost of an IT security analyst in London is about 100,000. You need 7 of those plus management. You're looking at £1 million worth of human investment before you start looking at the tools you're going to put in place.
Yeah.
And then making sure that you're covering that. Generally,
and frankly, there aren't enough analysts either. So once you establish them, they'll get better job offers and scoot off down the road. It's really difficult to run a SOC.
It's been a real trend in the last 5-10 years that there just isn't enough people in the job market to actually support these things, which is why we're seeing the trend. And if you look at sort of Gartner and MITRE reviews on what's happening in the sort of the analyst environment, so many people are moving towards managed services just because they can't, even if it's a multinational enterprise SOC, they just can't get the people. So it's much easier for them and much more cost sensible to actually outsource that.
So, Barry, what kind of companies are we seeing moving towards MDR? What size?
Everything. So everything from your sort of high street firm, three offices of 50 people, all the way up to multiple thousand user enterprises utilize MDR.
Yeah.
So yeah, everyone, anyone, and it may be that you as a small business owner are thinking, well, hang on, if you're also working with multinational, multi-billion-dollar businesses, what sort of level of security are we going to get alongside those? We don't. And if you actually hear Joe Levy, our CEO, talk, we really don't discriminate. We would much prefer that those small businesses have the same level of security as an enterprise. And if you actually look at sort of the cyber poverty line and where the vast majority of organizations fall, other vendors out there on the market whose names shall ever be hidden in history, they are not looking at SMBs. They're not looking at small to medium-sized organizations and looking at how security can be made to work for them. Very much the MDR that we provide to, again, multinational government companies, government organizations, is the same MDR that we provide to less than 200 seat organizations as well.
Yeah. I think, you know, we'll get back to Tracy. We'll get in touch with you after the call. We'll get our sales team to get in touch with you. But I think there's a licensing cost for Sophos, and then there's the MDR cost can be built into your monthly fee per user, that sort of thing. I think that's the way the arrangement works anyway on that. So thanks very much for that. I'll just move on. John, with this, Sophos and CommSec are offering a free threat assessment. Could you tell us what that entails?
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, as a thank you for attending. We are offering in partnership with CommSec a security posture assessment, which essentially does some of the things that I talked about in terms of looking on the web and trawling the web to see what we can find out about your organization, really looking at it through the lens of if we were going to be cyber criminals, what would we be trying to find out? So looking for stolen creds and interesting data. So that is a very interesting exercise to just kind of see what your digital footprint looks like as an organization and where you can make improvements or where you need to make some changes. So that is, as I say, provided free of charge. So thank you for being here. And I believe that if they just get in contact with their account manager at CommSec, then we can make that happen. Is that the procedure? Yeah,
that, or we're going to send out a follow-up with a recording to this session. So if you can just reply to that email, we can get the team to get in touch with you directly that way. Or you can email us directly as on screen, sales@commsec.ie. It comes into the sales team directly. So that's everything. I just wanted to say thank you very much to John and Bradley and the team of Sophos for their support in putting on this very insightful webinar. I think, John, you understood the brief. Scare the hell out of us.
I did what you told me to do.
Pre-Halloween, yeah, no, absolutely. But I think it's you can never be too careful. So, and then Bradley for coming up with the strategies and where MDR fits into this and how available that is to SMBs and enterprises on the market. So, without keeping any further, thank you for your time and attendance today, and we look forward to continuing on the conversation in the future. Thanks, guys.
Brilliant. Thanks a lot.